A brittle wind whistles through the shattered arches of a monastery long forsaken, carrying with it the scent of mildew and scorched parchment. The stones, blackened by centuries of rain and candle smoke, groan under the weight of memory, echoing faintly beneath the tread of an unseen visitor. Each step stirs the dust into ghostly eddies, which cling to the air like fragments of forgotten prayers. Silence here is not absence. It is a living presence, thick and oppressive, curling in the corners, pooling in the hollows of the worn stone floors. The walls themselves seem to breathe, exhaling the damp chill of centuries, inhaling the faint disturbance of new life. Within these walls, knowledge slumbers, bound in vellum stiff with age. Ledgers crack when handled, their ink faded to whispers, their scripts curling like the fingers of a hand long gone. These manuscripts are not mere records. They are vessels of forbidden wisdom, glimpses of thought too dangerous for the world beyond these stones. A single margin, densely packed with annotations, hints at contemplations that could topple kingdoms or shatter faith. The monks who once tended these secrets have vanished, leaving only traces of devotion, an unpolished chalice that gleams faintly in the gloom, a brittle residue of incense clinging stubbornly to carved niches, a bell cracked and silent, yet still hanging, defying the inevitability of decay. Footsteps, careful but hesitant, stir the dust and the silence. There is a sense of being watched, an invisible congregation of absent minds, their judgment lingering, neither hostile nor benign. The air is heavy with expectation, as though the walls themselves bear witness to the trespass of the living upon the sacred domain of memory. A lone raven circles above, wings slicing the gray sky, casting shadows that drift across the collapsed cloisters like dark ink over parchment. Outside, the wind bends the reeds along the riverbank into a whispering chorus, a mournful hymn to all that has been lost. The sound is a faint, rustling accompaniment to the monastery's own dirge, a reminder that even in abandonment, life persists in its own subtle rhythms. The visitor's gaze falls upon a manuscript, caught mid-flutter as if it were breathing. The pages move with a life of their own, edges curling and uncurling in the draft, revealing the meticulous hand of someone long dead. Every symbol, every stroke, carries the weight of intention and obsession, a meticulous layering of thought, warning, and revelation. The marginalia, nearly illegible, hint at secrets deemed too perilous for any eyes but those willing to confront them fully. Each letter vibrates with the echoes of its scribe's soul, a silent testament to the price of knowledge. Here, within these walls, time is gathered in layers, sedimentary and immutable, yet every artifact trembles at the approach of the living, a fragile bridge between memory and oblivion. A sense of unease grows. The stones seem to lean inward, pressing in upon the intruder, while shadows coil and twist along the arches, forming shapes that are almost, but never quite, human. The wind carries a voice that is more felt than heard, brushing against the skin with icy insistence, whispering fragments of chants and lost supplications. In one corner, a fresco barely clings to the plaster, a saint's face fractured and weary, eyes hollow yet somehow accusatory. It is as if the monastery itself remembers its failings, the silent betrayals and whispered doubts that once filled its halls. The sacred and the profane mingle here, inseparable and unresolved, leaving the visitor to navigate a labyrinth of memory and sin. A sudden draft flutters the pages of another ledger, and the visitor glimpses the outlines of diagrams, alchemical symbols, and astronomical charts. The ink is dark as blood, yet retains a strange luminosity in the dim light, as though the knowledge contained within resists the erosion of time. One cannot help but wonder what horrors and wonders were contemplated here. formulas for transformation, prayers to unseen forces, charts mapping the heavens in patterns that might alter destiny. Every symbol seems deliberate, yet cryptic, as though the scribe left a message both for the future and for no one at all. It is a library of the forbidden, a sanctuary for thoughts too dangerous, too luminous to survive in the open world. The visitor pauses, hand hovering over the manuscripts. A faint scent of iron and earth mingles with the acrid memory of fire long extinguished. It is the smell of survival and decay, of battles fought silently within the mind as much as on distant fields. Each step deeper into the cloisters feels like a step further into a story that resists comprehension, one written in the language of shadows and echoes. A single beam of light falls through a broken window, catching motes of dust and illuminating the gilt edges of Scripture as if offering a fleeting glimpse of revelation. Yet the beauty is cruel, for the pages threaten to crumble at the slightest touch, reminding the visitor of the fragility of all human endeavor, of all that we attempt to preserve against the inexorable tide of time. Here, the monastery holds its power in restraint. It offers a glimpse, a whisper, a shadow, but never the whole. One could spend a lifetime deciphering the scripts and still grasp only the surface of its truths. And perhaps that is the intent: knowledge that tempts, knowledge that punishes, knowledge that demands courage of spirit and mind. To linger too long is to risk becoming a part of the memory, another shadow among the stones, another silent witness to the unraveling of faith and ambition. Outside, the raven descends, circling the ruined cloisters, its wings slicing the fog-laden air in measured beats, a reminder that the world beyond still moves, even as this place seems suspended between the mortal and the eternal. Time here has no mercy. The visitor notices the moss creeping into the mortar, tendrils of green curling along the edges of carved letters, overtaking what was once held sacred. Rainwater drips from fractured gutters, striking puddles with a hollow, metallic note, each drop a tiny bell tolling for a lost age. Rodents scurry unseen, their soft, scraping sounds punctuating the silence, a reminder that life does not pause for reverence. Even the air feels thick with anticipation, as if every inhalation draws the memory of generations of monks closer to the surface, urging the visitor to remember, to feel, to fear the weight of what has been abandoned. In the nave, shafts of light illuminate dust motes that dance like ethereal spirits. The long-forgotten pews, scarred and splintered, seem almost to beckon, their shadows forming patterns that suggest human figures kneeling in eternal prayer. The visitor imagines the chants that once filled these halls, rising and falling like waves against the stone, voices lifting in harmony to the heavens. Those voices are gone, replaced by the whispering of wind, the scratching of quills, the soft creak of timber under its own age. Yet in this absence, the monastery speaks more clearly than it ever could with sound. It tells of devotion, obsession, and the silent despair of those who sought to hold knowledge against the tide of ignorance. In a small scriptorium, a solitary desk remains, scarred with the indelible marks of fervent labor. Ink pots, now dried and cracked, sit like tombstones on its surface. Quills lie broken or bent, as if frozen mid-thought, abandoned in haste or fatigue. The visitor can almost hear the scratching of nib on vellum, the soft sighs of a monk in contemplative labor, the barely audible muttering of Latin prayers over diagrams of the stars. It is a theater of the mind, a stage set for devotion and despair, where the actors are long gone, but the echo of their existence permeates every corner. The monastery is a palimpsest of history, each stone and each object layered with meaning and memory. Frescoes peeling from the walls hint at biblical narratives, saints and sinners intertwined in a chaotic, spectral dance. The visitor senses the tension between what was meant to endure and what has been forsaken, the collision of human ambition and divine expectation. Each fragment of art, each fading pigment, carries the weight of intention, a silent testament to lives committed to understanding, interpreting, and sometimes defying the sacred order. And yet, for all its decay, the monastery is not dead. A faint heartbeat resonates in the stone, a pulse born of memory and lingering devotion. The wind carries with it a fragrance of damp earth, burnt candles, and iron, mingling with the scent of old parchment, stirring a cocktail of fear, reverence, and anticipation. The visitor moves cautiously, aware that each step might disturb the fragile balance between the past and present, between the seen and unseen. Every creaking hinge, every shifting shadow becomes a narrative unto itself, a story of endurance, obsession, and inevitable decline. As the visitor reaches the threshold of the cloister, the monastery seems to exhale, folding its memory around the intruder like a shroud. The bell swings slightly in the wind, letting out a metallic whisper that resonates far longer than the air should allow. Manuscripts settle, stirring against one another as if to murmur secrets in a language older than speech. The raven circles once more, its shadow briefly touching the walls and the visitor alike, a silent sentinel of what has been lost and what remains. Stepping into the gray light beyond the ruins, the visitor carries with them not only the weight of what has been observed, but also the memory of silence as a living entity. The wind swirls around, tugging at garments and hair, pulling the past into the present for one fleeting moment. Beyond the monastery, the world continues, indifferent to the secrets and wisdom trapped in stone and vellum. Yet the shadow of this sanctuary stretches outward, brushing the mind of the living with a weight of memory, devotion, and forbidden knowledge. Even as the visitor walks away, the monastery watches, remembering, waiting. The faintest echoes of chant, of quills scratching over vellum, and of prayers uttered long ago remain, held in the cold stone, waiting for another to awaken them. It is a place suspended between memory and oblivion, with a boundary between life and death, devotion and despair. Knowledge and secrecy is as thin and brittle as the vellum in the scriptorium. To leave is to carry the monastery within oneself, its whispers lingering in the mind, urging the brave or the foolish to return. Morning frost clings to the edges of roofless halls, sharp and crystalline beneath the soles of boots that dare tread here. Every step fractures the silence like splintering glass, sending a cold shiver up the spine. The abbey lies half-buried in tangled brambles, a skeletal monument to centuries of devotion, dissent, and quiet rebellion. Its stones, cracked and weathered, tell of winters endured, of summers burned by sun, and of the endless, patient labor of hands long turned to dust. The air is heavy, sweet with the scent of moss, bitter with the cold, and laced with the faint, almost imperceptible hum of memories. Within the cloisters, the rhythm of absent footsteps lingers like an echo trapped in stone. Long benches, worn smooth by generations of hands, bear witness to prayer and despair alike. Fingers trace scripture here, fingers that left no mark but imprinted themselves upon the very mortar, embedding hope, fear, and doubt into the bones of the building. The silence feels intentional, a living thing that holds its breath in reverence for what once was. Sunlight pierces shattered windows in shards, illuminating motes of dust that hang suspended like tiny phantoms. A discarded quill rests atop a ledger, its tip blackened and brittle, a sentinel of knowledge that dared defy the strictures of kings and clergy. The pages beneath whisper of heresies, cures, and alchemical formulas once forbidden to the common eye, their ink stubborn against oblivion, a rebellion frozen in time. Candles long extinguished leave trails of hardened wax, shaped like tears caught mid-fall, glinting dully in the weak morning light. They tell stories of nights spent in vigil, of monks tracing prayers by torchlight, of devotion wrapped in fear. Every melted candle, every frozen drop, is a relic of a life wholly surrendered to faith and understanding. The abbey hums faintly with a resonance that only the past can carry, a vibration in stone and air that suggests chanting, murmured prayers, the scraping of pens across parchment. It is the sound of absence, yet it feels as palpable as the wind that whistles through broken arches. Symbols etched into walls tell of exile, secrecy, and belief tested by fire. Some are crosses, simple and severe. Others spiral into complex, almost incomprehensible shapes that hint at rituals, rites, and doctrines lost to the passage of time. They are not mere decoration. They are cries into eternity, desperate messages meant to survive persecution, war, and neglect. Each scratch, each carved line, vibrates with intention, a bridge between the vanished monks and those who might one day walk these halls, seeking to understand what was once too dangerous to speak aloud. A door, half lifted from its hinge, groans as if protesting the intrusion. Pushing it slowly reveals a courtyard bathed in pale sunlight, frost still clinging stubbornly to the edges of stone fountains. The scent of moss rises like incense, warm and earthy against the cold, reminding the visitor that life persists even in places abandoned by human hands. Every step in the courtyard feels like trespassing in a sacred dialogue between the living and the long dead. The frost underfoot cracks faintly, and in the silence that follows, one can almost hear the faint echo of robes brushing against stone, of feet shuffling across tiles worn smooth by devotion and secrecy. Above, a blackbird perches atop the leaning bell tower, a sentinel of memory, its dark eyes glinting with a curious intelligence. Long ago, these bells would have told in a rhythm that marked life itself, summoning the faithful, mourning the dead, signaling work and prayer. Now the bird alone keeps watch, a living witness to a silence deeper than any winter night, its presence a reminder that memory requires a keeper, even in the absence of humanity. Inside, the refectory stretches like a cavern of echoes. Long tables bear the scars of centuries. Each mark a testament to countless meals shared in contemplation, study, and devotion. The air is cold but carries faint traces of roasted grains, burnt bread, and lingering incense, odors stubborn enough to resist time itself. Shadows gather in corners where sunlight cannot reach, deepening the sense that one is walking not through empty rooms, but through lives lived and prayers spoken. The abbey breathes its history into every stone, every crevice, as if conscious that its story must persist beyond the fragile lives of those who built it. The library, heart of the abbey, lies in ruin yet radiates power. Shelves sag under the weight of books, their spines cracked, their pages yellowed and brittle. Open volumes litter the floor, revealing diagrams of herbs, stars, alchemical symbols, and scripts that speak of knowledge too dangerous for ordinary men. Some writings contain cures for fever and plague, others philosophical treatises on the nature of the soul, heretical texts that challenge the rigid orthodoxy of the outside world. Each page bears the sweat and fear of its author, a silent rebellion against ignorance and tyranny. The library is a tomb for ideas, but also a sanctuary where curiosity refused to die. A spiral stairway carved into stone leads to chambers that once housed monks and scholars. Hearths are cold, ashes gray, yet the presence of human life lingers. Carved names, faint prayers scrawled on scraps of parchment, and remnants of personal belongings hint at lives fully devoted to the pursuit of understanding. The wind slips through broken windows, carrying voices that are almost imagined, whispers, chants, perhaps laughter, or sighs of exhaustion from centuries past. These rooms hold the delicate tension of human vulnerability intertwined with the audacity of intellect, where faith, curiosity, and fear coexisted in quiet, determined harmony. Beyond the abbey, the forest presses close, indifferent yet insistent, creeping tendrils brushing against towers, walls, and graves. Frost glints on leaves, fallen branches, and half-buried tombstones, marking the boundary between human achievement and the reclaiming hand of nature. Time here seems suspended, caught between decay and persistence. One can almost see the abbey alive once more. Bells tolling, robes sweeping across floors, the scent of ink and oil, the low murmur of voices seeking knowledge. Nature and man, memory and oblivion, brush against each other in a delicate dance, where silence holds as much meaning as sound. The sun rises higher, illuminating inscriptions etched into walls, revealing the delicate handiwork of men who risked their lives to leave behind what could not be spoken aloud. The wind stirs, lifting scraps of parchment, teasing them into gentle arcs, as if the abbey itself is breathing its memories into the world. Hands that once trembled with fear now feel immortalized in the surviving letters, diagrams, and symbols. The blackbird stirs again, wings flashing, a living bridge between past and present, between silence and memory. Every step within these ruins is a trespass into the sacred dialogue of vanished monks and eternity itself. The abbey is a poem written in stone, shadow, frost, and moss, in ink and whispered prayer. Its silence is alive, filled with devotion, secrecy, hope, and defiance. And yet, as one walks these halls, a haunting question lingers. What knowledge must be preserved, and what is lost to the passage of time? The abbey answers not in words, but in the cold brush of stone against skin, the brittle crack of frost underfoot, the glint of ice on moss, the flight of the blackbird across the courtyard. Morning stretches into noon, and the abbey breathes. Sunlight melts frost into rivulets that run along stone, catching debris, leaves, and fragments of parchment in their flow. Shadows retreat, revealing more carvings, inscriptions, and the quiet dignity of rooms long abandoned, yet fiercely alive with memory. One imagines the monks moving through these spaces, silent prayers whispered over ink, the careful measurement of herbs, the trembling hope that their knowledge might outlast persecution, disease, and war. Outside, the forest hums, the wind speaking in voices older than stone, reminding the visitor that life and decay are inseparable and that memory must fight to survive, just as they did. The abbey, frozen in time, waits patiently, its secrets held tight beneath frost and moss. Yet it also offers a whisper of invitation to remember, to witness, and to carry forward the fragile persistence of human curiosity. Every corner, every shadowed niche, every frozen puddle of wax tells the same story. Courage in seeking, peril in knowing, and the quiet majesty of silence itself. It is here, in the delicate balance between ruin and memory, between frost and sunlight, that one understands the true weight of devotion, of curiosity, and of the relentless, haunting passage of history. A low fog drifts through arches rimmed with ivy, curling around the stone like a whisper of forgotten prayers. It clings stubbornly to the jagged cliffs, curling in unseen eddies, softening the harsh outlines of the world beyond, as though reluctant to let the monastery go. The walls rise from the rock with solemn authority, ancient stones carved and fitted by hands long rotted into dust. Moss gathers in the cracks, green as envy, and the wind carries the chill of centuries. Below, the river glints with a sullen, silvery light, tracing the valley's curves in slow, deliberate patterns, each ripple a quiet witness to lives long vanished. The sun, when it dares to pierce the mist, spreads its pallid rays across the cliffs with hesitancy, as if unsure whether it is permitted to touch this sacred place. Inside, the remnants of a library breathe in a language of their own. The scent of aged paper, mingled with dried ink and the faint copper tang of old blood, rises from open manuscripts, curling like smoke in the still, sacred air. Some books lie spread across tables as if their readers had been snatched mid-thought, leaving words dangling, suspended between comprehension and oblivion. Others are stacked meticulously against walls that groan under the weight of time, silent sentinels protecting secrets that might otherwise vanish. The air itself seems charged, a subtle tension that prickles skin and awakens the mind. Every page carries a residue of the hands that traced it, the eyes that lingered upon it, the hearts that beat in rhythm with its revelations. A monk's robe, moth-eaten and stiff, drapes over a chair, still shaped by the posture of its long-dead wearer. The chair seems to lean slightly forward, as though expecting him to return, as though expecting devotion to continue where it left off. The fabric whispers of quiet prayers, of whispered doubts, of hours spent in the struggle between faith and understanding. And in the silence, one can almost hear him. The shuffle of bare feet on stone, the muted creak of the robe, the subtle intake of breath before bending over parchment, candlelight flickering across furrowed brows. From the cliffs above, a ruined bell tower leans precariously toward the valley below, its hollow tolls resonating in distant echoes. Each ring carries both warning and lament, each vibration a reminder that the world outside is relentless, yet fragile, and that even here, among these stones, time wields its inevitable power. The sound mingles with the cries of crows circling endlessly in the gray sky, wings slicing shadows into the fog, a constant witness to the passage of seasons. Life beyond these walls pulses with urgency and chaos. But here, in this monastery, existence is suspended, a breath held in delicate equilibrium between memory and decay. Candles, half melted and bowing toward gravity's will, cast shadows that writhe and twist across the walls like restless specters. One flame shivers and dies, leaving the room a hollow darkness, only to be chased away by another, braver spark. Each manuscript seems charged with the tension between revelation and oblivion. The margin notes, diagrams, and tiny annotations speak of human ambition wrested into form, of understanding pursued in secrecy, of devotion pressed into service for the preservation of thought. One can almost imagine the scribe's hand hovering over parchment, poised to record an insight, only to pause in the sudden awareness of being watched by time itself. The monastery's silence is not emptiness. It is dense, a living organism, carrying the pulse of countless lives that have passed through these halls. The whispers of monks long dead hang in the air, threads woven into the stone and timber. Their chants, broken and fragmented, drift faintly from the corners, lingering like smoke, forming a spectral symphony of devotion and doubt. Each stone seems to lean in, attentive, as though eager to catch a word, a thought, a prayer, to ensure nothing is lost entirely. Even decay feels purposeful here, as though every crack, every splintered shelf is a lesson in endurance, a testament to the stubborn persistence of human aspiration. The corridors wind with deliberate complexity, twisting and narrowing in ways that disorient the mind, like the labyrinth of thought itself. A single torch, held aloft, casts grotesque forms upon the walls, arches bending unnaturally, doors yawning like gaping mouths, shadows whispering secrets in languages long abandoned. Here, the tangible and ethereal coexist. The air carries a faint taste of iron, of wax, of dust, and the lingering sweetness of devotion unclaimed by the world beyond. Each inhalation pulls in centuries. Each exhalation releases a ghost of the past, and in the rhythm of breathing, the monastery seems alive. Outside, the wind rises with sudden insistence, threading its way through arches, rattling the shutters, stirring the ivy in a muted frenzy. The crows above wheel and scream, guardians of high places, their cries sharp and accusatory, slicing through the fog with a raw, untempered vitality. The river below moves like molten silver, relentless and patient, swallowing secrets and carrying them beyond the reach of any human hand. Yet within these walls, knowledge endures, stubborn as stone, fragile as flame, waiting for those who might be bold enough to reach through the shadows, to touch the manuscripts, to bring the quiet thoughts of centuries into the living present. Each book holds more than words. It holds the labor, the fear, and the longing of those who sought to preserve understanding. The margins reveal tiny, trembling doubts wrestled into clarity. Diagrams trace invisible architectures of thought, and cryptic symbols hint at mysteries meant only for the patient, the careful, the devoted. Here, silence is not absence, but presence, dense, reverent, and electric with possibility. One can almost imagine the hurried steps of a monk returning to a table after a brief errand, his mind racing with discovery, his fingers brushing the candle flame, heart quickened by the thrill of insight. Even the walls lean inward, attentive, as though aware of the delicacy of the human enterprise they have witnessed for generations. The bell tower above shudders in protest as the wind shakes its hollow frame. Each toll neither joy nor lament, but a resonance that exists in the liminal space between both. Fog thickens, winding through arches and along stone corridors, cloaking the library in an ethereal, spectral veil. Time feels suspended, a river frozen mid-flow, holding its breath for the arrival of the next seeker of truths. Outside, the world may surge, crumble, and forget, but within the monastery, the heartbeat of knowledge endures. It is fragile, it is stubborn, and it waits. It waits for hands steady enough, minds daring enough, hearts brave enough to awaken what sleeps. And yet, amidst the silence, there is tension. One can sense the danger inherent in knowledge, how fragile it is, how perilous to preserve. Monks who once walked these halls did so with vigilance, aware that beyond the cliffs, chaos and conquest threatened the fragile peace of the mind. Wars came and went, kings and tyrants rose and fell, and still the monastery endured, a thin flame in a world too often governed by sword and fire. Shadows lengthen across the floor as the day advances, the light shifting like a slow tide. Dust motes hover in the beams, each one a small universe of forgotten history, each one a reminder that life, too, is fleeting, delicate, and luminous. And so, the monastery breathes, a living repository of human ambition and humility alike. Its stones murmur of devotion, of daring, of minds that reached across the gulf of centuries to leave fragments of eternity behind. Candles burn low. Manuscripts lie in patient silence. The river flows, relentless and impartial. The wind sweeps across the cliffs, carrying with it the cries of crows and the toll of the bell. And in the stillness, a question hangs, heavy as the mist. Who will come next? Who will trace the margins with careful hands? Who will dare to touch these sleeping pages? Who will awaken the echoes of centuries past? The monastery waits, patient, vigilant, and alive, dreaming of those willing to hear its whispers, to step into its shadows, and to find, amid the dust and fog, the fragile spirit of knowledge. Rain hammers the remnants of a tiled roof, each drop like a drumbeat in a cathedral of emptiness. It pools in the deep cracks where moss flourishes like stubborn green flames, and tiny insects whisper their fragile laments beneath the soaked tiles. The wind slips through the gaps in the stonework, carrying with it the scent of cold earth, wet leaves, and the distant, briny breath of the sea. Outside, cliffs shiver under the weight of the storm, jagged edges vanishing into gray clouds, while below, waves batter the rocks in a relentless, hypnotic rhythm. Nature itself seems to test the endurance of this sacred, forsaken place. Inside, the monastery stretches in solemn silence. Its main hall, once a sanctuary of devotion, is now a cathedral of echoes. The walls groan under the memory of prayers spoken centuries ago. Frescoes, faded to ghostly outlines, depict saints and heretics alike, their eyes seeming to follow every intruder with silent judgment. Angels hover with impossibly elongated wings, their faces serene yet severe, while martyrs clutch wounds that will never heal. Paint curls from walls like the skin of time, revealing the many hands that dared to shape the divine. Art here is a whisper from the past, a testament to faith, fear, and the fragile human desire to reach beyond mortality. In a quiet corner, almost hidden, a chest bound in iron and leather trembles beneath the touch of a curious hand. It is small and unassuming, yet it quivers as if aware of the power it guards. Inside, scrolls rest in careful disorder, ink blackened by centuries, written in tongues that no living scholar can fully speak. Their contents hum with danger, alchemical formulas capable of fire or healing, forbidden philosophies challenging the cosmic order, incantations meant to summon or banish forces beyond human comprehension. Each scroll beats like a heart, a warning, a promise. The very air around it seems to pulse with anticipation, as though the chest itself remembers the hands that crafted these secrets and the hands that once feared their exposure. The stone floors beneath bare feet bear the imprint of devotion, austerity, and silent suffering. Long-abandoned footprints remain etched into the cold slabs, tracks of monks who moved in rigid rhythm, fasting and praying in candlelit hours, whispering psalms to walls that could not answer. Their lives were a choreography of discipline, of seeking understanding in the suffocating quiet, and of holding knowledge too dangerous to share. Every step here is a negotiation with ghosts, every breath a communion with souls long gone. To tread this hall is to move alongside centuries of silent observers, to feel the weight of their knowledge pressing gently upon the living. Candles tremble in broken sconces, casting fragmented light across walls carved with cryptic symbols. Each sigil is a cipher, a ward against evil, a record of sin, a hidden plea for protection. Shadows stretch and twist as the flames flicker, merging with the contours of stone to form figures that seem almost alive. Sometimes a flicker suggests a presence, a fleeting motion at the edge of vision, a whisper of movement. Silence dominates, yet it is charged with expectation, humming with the vigilance of those who constructed this place not for comfort, but for survival. The scent of damp timber and mold fills the air, mingling with the faint sweetness of wine long forgotten in clay jugs. Each inhalation carries the melancholy of centuries, lives devoted to knowledge, devotion, and secrecy, now surrendered to dust and shadow. The smell presses against the skin like memory itself, a tangible reminder that nothing here is untouched by time. Knowledge like this fragrance is persistent. It clings to everything, marking every stone, every tile, every breath. Through arched windows, the storm rages in full fury. Trees bend over cliffs as if bowing in prayer or in fear, and rain lashes them with relentless intensity. Somewhere below, water hammers against stone in a rhythm older than the monastery itself, a heartbeat that mocks human endurance and humility. Those who once inhabited these halls would have listened to it and understood their fragility. And yet, even in the shadow of nature's power, the human mind sought to transcend, to understand, to control. The monastery is a crucible of that ambition, a place where intellect and devotion collided under the gaze of eternity. This silence is sacred, yet it is alive. Every corner holds memory, every shadow carries intent. Visitors are made painfully aware that this is a realm governed not only by stone and wood, but by centuries of vigilance and devotion. To speak is to risk breaking a covenant older than memory. To move is to disturb the delicate balance of observation and secrecy. Curiosity is both a gift and a peril. Those who linger too long may find themselves entangled in truths they are unprepared to bear. A sudden draft stirs the chest parchment. Scrolls quiver as if waking from a deep slumber. One could almost hear the voices of the scribes who wrote them, hands steady yet trembling, candlelight flickering, hearts aware that exposure could bring ruin. Tension saturates the room. Revelation and danger sit side by side like coiled serpents, waiting. Each symbol on the walls, each scratch of ink, carries the story of lives entwined with fear and faith, of knowledge fought for and hidden from those deemed unworthy. Footsteps echo in corridors beyond the main hall, tentative and hesitant. The storm leans closer, pressing its weight against the monastery's fragile shell. One wonders what drew these monks here: desperation, devotion, rebellion, curiosity. They risked isolation, weather, and mortality to pursue understanding. This monastery was more than a refuge. It was a crucible with a human mind brushed against the divine, where courage and fear were inseparable companions in the pursuit of forbidden wisdom. And yet, there is beauty in this decay. It is not a comforting beauty. It is raw, unsettling, yet profoundly alive. The interplay of rain and stone, the faint aroma of mold and wine, the trembling candles and iron-bound chests, they form a symphony of the forgotten, a testament to human striving and impermanence. One imagines monks walking these halls, lips moving silently in prayer, hearts burdened with secrets, minds alive with forbidden knowledge. Even abandoned, the place hums with presence, an invisible congregation observing the living. The storm subsides, but the monastery does not relax. Drops cling to moss and tile. Wind murmurs through cracks in stone, carrying the memory of every scholar, ascetic, and seeker who dared enter. The sun breaks through gray clouds, revealing faint color in frescoes and bringing a fragile warmth to cold stone. In that light, one senses a dialogue between past and present, a fragile bridge across centuries of devotion, fear, and curiosity. Within these walls, knowledge is not merely written, it is breathed. It lingers in the air, in the stillness, in the heartbeats of those who dare to remain. Each whisper of candlelight is a question posed by the past. Will you tread lightly? Will you respect what has been preserved? Or will you awaken forces better left dormant? The monastery waits, patient and eternal, holding secrets too precious, too dangerous to ever fully reveal. Somewhere deep in the corridors, a single candle guttered, casting long, trembling shadows. The sound of rain softened into dripping echoes, and the air thickened with the presence of memory. The stones themselves seemed to pulse with life, carrying the weight of devotion, fear, and knowledge. One could almost hear the chants of monks, faint and ghostly, intertwining with the sigh of wind through broken windows. In this room, time is a living entity, folding past, present, and future into a single, oppressive presence. And yet, for all its weight, There is hope here, fragile, flickering, yet unmistakable. It exists in the small acts of devotion once performed, in the scrolls that survive against centuries of neglect, in the whispers of wind and water that speak of endurance. The monastery is a place where silence has teeth, but where human curiosity and faith persist despite the risk. To walk these halls is to confront mortality, desire, and knowledge itself, a test of courage, patience, and reverence. Beyond the windows, cliffs remain steadfast against the storm. Waves continue their endless assault, and the wind bends the trees in silent obedience. Inside, the monastery breathes in slow, deliberate rhythm, a guardian of the human mind's most daring impulses, a witness to the collision of fear and ambition, devotion and transgression. Here, knowledge is both a gift and a curse, held in trust by stone, candlelight, and the unyielding passage of time. To enter is to step into a living archive of human striving, fear, and wonder. Every flicker of candlelight, every drop of rain, every shadowed corner carries a story. It is a place where time folds upon itself, where knowledge lingers in the air, waiting for a hand brave or foolish enough to reach for it. And as the storm finally releases its fury, leaving behind only the gentle patter of water on stone, one realizes that the monastery itself is alive, not merely in structure, but in memory, intent, and expectation. It waits. Always it waits. Twilight poured through the fractured windows, spilling shards of gold and violet across the ruined nave. The light clung to the dust like a shivering host of spirits, reluctant to leave the stone that had cradled them for centuries. Each beam struck the jagged edges of walls, charred from forgotten fires, illuminating traces of frescoes and the faint, worn contours of angelic figures whose faces had long since been effaced by time. The monastery exhaled history with every gust of wind, and in that breath, the past felt achingly present, pressing against the intruder as if the stones themselves could speak. Here, every shadow, every crack, was a repository of memory, echoing devotion, betrayal, fear, and a ceaseless pursuit of knowledge that men once deemed holy or dangerous beyond reckoning. The scent was complex, almost unbearable in its layering. Smoke from long-dead fires mingled with the earthiness of damp stone and the dry, brittle aroma of decayed parchment. Beneath it all lingered the faint perfume of resin, bitter and persistent, a ghostly trace of candles once lit in devotion, their flames trembling with human hope and fear. A broken rosary lay across the altar, each bead dulled by centuries of prayer, its cross chipped and worn, yet it still carried the rhythm of whispered devotion. Near it, a fragment of carved wood, a delicate bird frozen mid-flight, rested as if a monk had let it fall from his trembling hands, imagining wings that could lift the soul closer to the heavens. A tattered cloak, the color of ash, was draped across a pew. Its presence suggested the sudden absence of a man or woman who had moved here in haste, leaving warmth behind. Yet all that remained was silence, a shadow of a life once breathed into these walls. The monastery itself seemed alive with secrets, as though it had taken on a consciousness shaped by centuries of human ambition and fear. The walls bore inscriptions, not just in the obvious hand of the monks, but in the invisible rhythms of those who had dared to challenge orthodoxy. Marginalia scrawled in nearly illegible ink whispered remedies for plagues, rites condemned by church law, and diagrams meant to glimpse the divine. They spoke of men who challenged the boundary between life and death, knowledge and heresy, ambition and despair. Footsteps stirred the dust along the stone floor, leaving a tentative trail, each echo reverberating like a low drumbeat through the nave. The monastery listened, patient and eternal, as if weighing the intent of intruders. In its shadows, devotion and guilt, courage and desperation, intertwined like serpents coiling in the dark. Outside, the wind bent the reed along the moat in slow, deliberate arcs, carrying with it the faint croak of a frog, the earthy fragrance of wet moss, and the metallic tang of rain yet to fall. A bird's cry pierced the gloom, shrill and fleeting, swallowed quickly by the encroaching darkness. And yet, within the nave, time seemed to suspend itself. The monastery waited, patient, a crucible where forbidden knowledge lingered in the stagnant air. Here, ambition, curiosity, and fear were suspended in a balance that had survived centuries, waiting for the next soul bold or foolish enough to intrude. Fragments of human life were scattered like the remnants of a dream. The altar, scarred and blackened by fire, stood solemn, both witness and relic. A fragment of manuscript lay nearby, its edges curling like dying leaves. The vellum was marked with sketches, star maps, anatomical diagrams, cryptic symbols, prayers written in trembling hands. These scraps told stories of men who sought knowledge that defied understanding, who risked excommunication, madness, or death to trace the divine spark within the mundane. Their work, once hidden and sacred, now lay exposed to the gaze of a lone intruder, fragile as the light that trembled across it. The intruder's steps disturbed centuries of accumulated dust. The echoes of each footfall resonated through the nave, drawing attention to the rhythm of life once lived here. A single torch, long extinguished, rested in its holder, blackened and melted from past flames. It whispered of nights spent in fevered study, of debates with invisible demons, and of questions posed with reckless courage. Shadows reached like skeletal hands toward the broken rosary, the carved bird, the tattered cloak. It was as if the monastery, in its silence, sought to ensnare the intruder in a conversation with the past, a test of resolve, a reminder of the dangers of human curiosity. The air was heavy, thick with the tension of lives devoted to secrets, devotion, and forbidden experiments. The nave itself felt like a living organism. The high, vaulted ceilings amplified even the slightest sound, a cough, a whisper, the scrape of stone against cloth. Each echo multiplied, growing into an invisible chorus of centuries past. The walls, pitted and scarred, seemed to exhale the lives that had passed through here. One could almost hear the low hum of chants, the quiet scratching of quills on parchment, the murmured incantations of men trying to reach the edge of divine understanding. Here, knowledge had been both illumination and peril, each discovery a potential path to salvation or damnation. The monastery's gardens, now overtaken by wild growth, were visible through the broken windows. Reeds and brambles swayed in the wind, their shadows casting shifting patterns across the stone floors. Once, they had been meticulously tended, each herb chosen for its healing properties, each plant a repository of wisdom. Now, nature claimed them back, entwining human ambition with the inevitability of decay. Even the moat reflected the fractured light of twilight, the ripples casting dancing patterns onto the walls, ephemeral as the lives that had moved within these halls. A sudden breeze stirred the pages of scattered manuscripts, as though the building itself wished to speak. The inked diagrams and prayers shifted, revealing secrets that had been hidden, if only for a moment. Remedies for plague, methods of alchemy, prayers condemned by orthodox law, all whispered from the margins, a dialogue between centuries. One could imagine the hands that had written them, trembling with fear, determination, and reverence. These walls had absorbed their intentions, their failures, and their fleeting triumphs. Even now, the monastery held them in suspension, neither lost nor fully alive. A crow landed atop the broken bell tower, its harsh caw cutting through the encroaching twilight. The sound echoed through the nave, a reminder of mortality and the passage of time. Below, the intruder paused, feeling the weight of centuries pressing down, a silent verdict rendered by unseen eyes. The monastery was patient, but it was also discerning. Not all who entered were worthy of its secrets. Each visitor became part of its history, a new layer upon the sediment of ambition, faith, and curiosity that had built and broken men before. The air grew colder as night approached, carrying the scent of impending rain across the moat. Drops began to fall, tapping lightly on the fractured roof, each one a miniature percussion against the stone. The sound was both comforting and ominous, a rhythm of continuity and decay. Within the nave, the light continued to fade, gilded edges dissolving into violet shadows. The broken rosary, the carved bird, the tattered cloak, all seemed to inhale the growing darkness, as if preparing for a new chapter in the endless story of the monastery. Even the walls, scarred and battered, seemed to lean closer, listening for the next whispered question, the next footstep, the next spark of curiosity daring enough to defy centuries of silence. The monastery's patient presence was almost tangible, pressing against the intruder's chest, wrapping the air in the weight of devotion and fear. Here, knowledge had always been a double-edged sword, illuminating yet perilous, sacred yet profane. Every surface bore its testament: the walls, the floors, the air itself, heavy with centuries of ambition, secrecy, and devotion. The intruder moved slowly, aware that each step disturbed more than dust. It disturbed echoes, memories, fragments of human courage, folly, and faith. Every corner, every shadow was alive, and the intruder could feel their presence pressing, urging, and warning. The last rays of twilight stretched through the nave, catching the edges of manuscripts, stones, and broken wood. A subtle glow illuminated the carved bird, as though it might take flight at any moment, and the rosary seemed to pulse faintly with memory. Shadows grew longer, coiling across the stone floors like living threads, tying past and present together. The monastery, patient and eternal, held its secrets close, yet allowed glimpses of them to those who dared. In a mingling of light and shadow, air and dust, silence and memory, one felt the fragile heartbeat of centuries, a rhythm both terrifying and beautiful. And as darkness descended fully, the monastery exhaled slowly, deliberately, a breath that carried centuries of secrets, devotion, ambition, and failure. The rain tapped on stone, the wind bent reeds along the moat, and the shadows seemed to deepen, pulling the intruder into the past and holding them there. In this fragile, haunting twilight, the monastery was not merely a ruin. It was a living memory, an eternal witness to human ambition, fear, and the insatiable hunger for knowledge. It waited for the next seeker, the next question, the next spark of curiosity daring enough to enter its shadowed halls. Here, in the intersection of light and darkness, past and present, the heart of the monastery beat still, silent yet alive, holding the stories of men who had risked everything in search of the truth. A single candle, stubbed and weary, clings to its last flicker in the corner of the scriptorium, its light trembling over vellum that has yellowed with centuries. Dust hangs in the air like a pale, spectral fog, stirring lazily in the heat of the tiny flame. Every mote catches the glow, drifting as if suspended in memory itself. The scriptorium smells of wax, mildew, and the faint metallic tang of rusted iron from clasps that once held sacred texts tight against time. It is a smell that carries weight, the mingling of devotion and decay, of prayers spoken and promises broken. Every carved capital, every splintered doorframe, every stone etched with faint initials is a palimpsest of hands long gone, hands that labored, whispered, and occasionally rebelled in silence. The walls themselves seemed to breathe, absorbing centuries of murmurs, of footsteps softened against stone, of prayers lifted to the heavens. A faint breeze, drawn through a narrow slit in the wall, stirs a ledger lying open on a low desk. Its pages quiver as though alive, revealing diagrams of plants that twist unnaturally in the imagination, astrological symbols mapping stars whose names have been forgotten, and alchemical formulas written in a cipher almost lost to time. It is a code that whispers of ambition and fear, of men and women reaching beyond their mortal grasp to touch the divine, or perhaps to claim a forbidden power. The wind lifts the page again, and a shadow seems to pass across the candlelight, fleeting, but the impression remains, like a memory brushing against the mind. Beyond the scriptorium, the courtyard stretches in patient desolation. A fountain, carved with angels and poses of silent entreaty, trickles water that has not run freely for decades. Moss has claimed the basin and its edges, green and damp, curling over stone like living lace. The faint murmur of water is steady and slow, a heartbeat from the past, marking time not in hours but in centuries. Here, silence is not emptiness. It is a living, tangible presence, a chorus of echoes carrying the weight of every soul that walked these cloisters. Each footstep, if it dared to intrude, would resonate like thunder through the hallowed space, announcing the living among the dead. High upon the battlements, ravens keep watch, their black feathers slick with dew, catching the pale sunlight as if bearing witness to everything, or perhaps nothing at all. Their eyes glint with awareness, and their stillness makes the walls below feel even heavier with memory. This monastery, abandoned yet full, is a kingdom of absence where the sacred and the profane have collided and linger in uneasy coexistence. Each sound, the groan of timber, the drip of water from a moss-covered gutter, the distant caw of a raven, feels magnified, a reminder that every echo carries the lives of those who came before, and perhaps the secrets they never intended to leave behind. In the scriptorium, the candle flickers again, casting shadows that twist across the walls like restless spirits. Once a monk may have bent over this very desk, quill in hand, whispering prayers and muttering notes to himself. Perhaps he trembled with fear, or perhaps with hope, trying to capture the divine in symbols, numbers, and letters. Every inked line on the vellum is a heartbeat, a fragment of intention, an act of defiance against the slow, inevitable erasure of time. One can imagine his breath mingling with the scent of wax and iron, his eyes straining to see the page in the dim, flickering glow. Every sigh, every pause, every careful stroke is an attempt to impose order upon chaos, to make meaning out of the shifting shadows of the world outside. The architecture of the monastery itself resounds with memory. Arches rise like reverent hands, cloisters fold inward in endless repetition, and stone walls, though cracked and weathered, hold the silence of centuries like water held in a deep, dark vessel. Windows, streaked with dust and shadow, scatter pale light across the floors in spectral fragments. Here, knowledge was not merely preserved. It was worshipped, hidden, and consecrated, sometimes in fear that it might tempt or corrupt those who were not ready. To touch the walls is to touch the past itself, to feel the pulse of ambition, faith, and fear that is seeped into the stone and would like a slow, unending river. Outside, the wind stirs the few surviving leaves clinging to skeletal trees, their brittle forms trembling against the pale sky. One imagines that the breeze carries the whispers of the monks, fragments of conversation, or secret confessions, barely audible against the backdrop of absence. The world beyond these walls, the roads, the forests, the villages where people lived and died, struggled and prayed, seems almost irrelevant. Within the monastery, time has been arrested. The air is thick with anticipation, as though the very stones themselves are waiting for some hand brave or curious enough to touch their secrets. Every threshold, every step, every tattered manuscript carries the possibility of revelation or ruin. A sudden gust rattles the scriptorium window, sending a shiver across the imagined monk's shoulders. He leans closer to the candle, ink-stained fingers hovering above the page, eyes tracing symbols that might be recipes for healing, or curses, or prayers to forces unseen. The light dances across the vellum, shadows bending and twisting, turning ordinary marks into shapes that feel alive. Each line, each symbol, each diagram is a prayer, a challenge, a declaration. The sacred and the profane converge here in every mark, in every shadow, in every sigh of the wind. In the courtyard, the fountain trickles on, patient and steady. Moss spreads across its edges, damp and stubborn, a testament to endurance against neglect. Beyond, the battlements rise like jagged teeth against the sky, and the ravens shift their weight, wings whispering softly against stone. Time here is not measured by hours, days, or seasons, but by the slow decay of materials and the persistence of memory. Footsteps that will never return, voices that will never speak, and prayers that have long since faded into silence still seem to linger, tangible in the cold, heavy air. And yet, despite the weight of absence, the monastery is alive in subtle ways. In the curling pages, in the twisting shadows, in the scent of wax and rust, there is a pulse. A story waits to be uncovered. Secrets lie hidden in the folds of pages, in the moss on stone, in the slow drip of water from gutters. One can imagine the monks' hearts beating in the same rhythm as the fountain, the candle, the wind, each life a fragment, each breath a prayer, each act of devotion a bridge to eternity. The candle shudders, guttering against its own mortality. Darkness creeps across the scriptorium, but even as shadows grow, the sense of presence deepens. The monastery waits, not with malice, not with judgment, but with patient insistence. Its secrets are not cruel. They're just bound to the rhythms of time, unfolding slowly, waiting for those who will notice, who will feel, who will understand. The air hums with expectation, and the mind strains to hear the whispers, to catch the faintest movement in the periphery of vision. What has been left behind is not just stone and ink, but desire, fear, ambition, and devotion, compressed into a tangible, almost living memory. The wind in the courtyard lifts again, rustling skeletal leaves and stirring the fountain's slow murmur. The moss glistens with dew. The ravens shift, black eyes alert, silent witnesses. And in the scriptorium, the last flame of the candle bends and trembles, casting light across diagrams that twist, symbols that shimmer, and writing that hums with the faint echo of human thought. One imagines the monk's lips moving in silent recitation, a chant of hope, of fear, of defiance, reaching across centuries in a fragile bridge of memory and longing. The flame dies. Darkness falls. And yet, even in that darkness, the monastery is alive. The pulse of memory beats in the stone, in the moss, in the water, in the feathered eyes of the ravens. The sacred and the profane meet in quiet tension. Silence itself seems to wait, holding its breath for the next touch, the next reader, the next soul brave enough to step across the threshold. Outside, the first light of dawn touches the highest battlements, glinting on the wet feathers of the watchers. The courtyard begins to soften, shadows retreating, and in that subtle illumination, the question hangs in the air. Will these stories remain buried, or will they rise again to breathe life into the world once more? And in this waiting, this suspended breath, the monastery becomes more than ruin. It becomes a vessel of the human spirit. Faith, fear, curiosity, obsession, and hope entwined, pressing against the walls, echoing through the halls, whispering through the dust. It is alive with memory, with longing, with all the fragile, fleeting life that once dwelled within. The candle is gone, but its light lingers in the mind, casting long shadows across the centuries, guiding those who dare to remember, to uncover, to feel. And outside, the fountain trickles still, the moss clings stubbornly, and the ravens keep their silent, eternal vigil. Mist curls around the base of a jagged hill where the monastery clings to the rock like a stubborn relic of faith, its stones weathered by centuries of wind, rain, and bitter winters. The early morning fog moves with a slow, deliberate grace, sometimes swallowing the upper spires entirely, sometimes parting just enough to reveal the broken bells and worn crosses atop the towers. It is a place suspended between time and memory, as if the outside world has forgotten it, and in turn, it has forgotten the outside world. The wind whistles through broken eaves, tugging at loose shingles and carrying with it the scent of wet earth, resin, decaying leaves, and the faint tang of rusted iron. Within this medley of odors is the lingering smell of old paper, ink, and the faint hint of incense from a chapel long since abandoned, its altar covered in dust and the remnants of candle wax hardened over decades. The approach to the monastery is a narrow, winding path lined with jagged rocks, moss-covered stones, and gnarled roots. The traveler must navigate treacherous inclines where the fog hides loose stones and sudden drops, and the only sound is the echo of one's own footsteps mingling with the distant call of birds or the occasional howl of a fox. Yet even the path seems to respect the sanctity of the place. It rises as if in obeisance to the monastery perched above, a silent prelude to the mysteries held within its walls. Once inside, the monastery reveals itself as a labyrinth of shadows, stone, and light. Corridors stretch into darkness, lined with arches carved centuries ago by hands now long gone. Every wall is pitted and scarred, bearing the weight of history, the marks of repairs, and the graffiti of generations of monks, scribes, and occasional visitors daring to leave a trace of themselves. The scriptorium, once a sanctuary of knowledge, lies in a state of deliberate disarray, as though chaos itself has claimed the space. Books are scattered across the floor and atop tables, their leather bindings cracked, their pages mottled with candle wax and water damage. Some manuscripts are stacked neatly in corners, almost reverently, while others are torn, burnt at the edges, or partially eaten by damp and mold. The air is thick with the scent of mildew and ink, a mingling of decay and devotion that speaks of centuries of tireless labor. A shattered window admits a shaft of pale light that falls upon a single manuscript, illuminating delicate script filled with alchemical symbols, strange diagrams, and dense marginalia. Prayers interwoven with remedies for mortal ailments, notations of sins confessed in secret, and subtle annotations that hint at forbidden knowledge. The hands that wrote these words did so in secret, often under threat of inquisitors or punishment, yet with a devotion that bordered on obsession. One can almost feel the presence of the scribe, a figure hunched over parchment by candlelight, quill in hand, eyes gleaming with curiosity, fear, and unwavering faith. Each stroke of the pen, each careful sketch, was a rebellion against ignorance, a defiance of kings and clerics alike. The bell tower rises at a precarious angle, its stonework cracked and crumbling, yet it dominates the landscape with quiet authority. Though it has not tolled in decades, its presence is commanding. Its shadow stretches long across the moss-laden courtyard, darkening the stones and the creeping weeds as if keeping watch over the monastery and its secrets. Beneath it, the courtyard is littered with the remnants of lives once lived. Rusted tools, toppled benches, fragments of pottery, and a scattering of bones, long bleached by sun and rain, that hint at both human fragility and the relentless passage of time. Each corridor hums with echoes of the past. Footsteps that once paced these halls in the cadence of prayer and contemplation can almost be heard. Voices that chanted in Latin or whispered confessions in the dead of night seem to linger in the arches and alcoves. The sound of quills scratching across parchment, the gentle flicker of candle flames, and the distant, haunting melody of a lute or organ all play in an unseen orchestra of memory. Even the stones seem imbued with these echoes, vibrating faintly with the resonance of centuries of devotion and secrecy. The monastery's rooms tell their own stories. The dormitories, sparse and cold, contain straw-stuffed mattresses covered in faded, moth-eaten blankets. Each bed is a silent witness to a life lived in austere devotion, where sleep was brief, prayer was constant, and comfort was a distant luxury. The kitchens hold rusted pots and pans, long since abandoned, alongside hearths blackened with soot, remnants of meals eaten in quiet reflection, sustenance for bodies dedicated to higher pursuits. In a library, the shelves groan under the weight of ancient tomes, some rescued from decay, others dangerously fragile. Titles hint at everything from mystical treatises and alchemical experiments to chronicles of distant lands and forbidden sciences. Each book is a testament to human curiosity, a fragile bridge across the centuries. Some rooms bear the marks of experiments, both sacred and profane. A broken astrolabe rests beside a pile of crushed minerals. Dried herbs are scattered across tables alongside glass vials filled with powders, liquids, or residue of mysterious reactions. Mortar and pestle sit in silent witness to trials undertaken in secret, each a step closer to understanding the divine, the natural world, or perhaps even the boundaries of mortality. Candles drip wax on a parchment and stone alike, freezing moments of concentration and revelation in solid form. Even the staircases, carved from the hill's living rock, seem alive with memory. Each worn step carries the imprint of countless monks, nuns, and scribes who ascended and descended in service of devotion and discovery. Up one flight, a monk may have carried a stack of books to the scriptorium. Down another, a novice may have carried water from a distant spring to the kitchens. The stairs themselves are a chronicle of human movement, a silent ledger of ambition, curiosity, and faith. Outside, the surrounding valley stretches into a mist-shrouded expanse of forest, hills, and streams. The light never fully penetrates the dense canopy of pines and oaks, leaving the monastery in a perpetual twilight, as if nature itself conspires to preserve the isolation of this sacred place. Streams glint like silver ribbons, their murmuring waters carrying the secrets of the hills, while the wind rustles through the leaves, bringing with it the faint echo of distant lives, far removed from the cloistered devotion above. Occasionally, a fox or hare wanders the overgrown paths, undisturbed by the silence and the shadows that dominate the grounds. The monastery waits in patient silence, guarding centuries of knowledge, faith, and devotion. Its stones have witnessed vows whispered in the dead of night, prayers offered under threat, tears shed in mourning, and moments of revelation. The manuscripts preserved within its walls contain the accumulated wisdom of countless generations, guarded against the ravages of time, ignorance, and fear. Even in decay, the monastery exudes an aura of quiet power, a presence that commands respect from both nature and man. Time itself seems to bend within these walls. A single shaft of sunlight, illuminating an ancient page, bridges centuries of human experience, connecting the reader to the hands and minds of those who lived, labored, and prayed here. It is a place of shadows and light, of ink-stained pages and crumbling stone, where sacred devotion and forbidden knowledge coexist in uneasy harmony. Each corner of the monastery tells a story. Every cracked wall whispers a secret, and a mist that clings to the hill below carries the echoes of lives lived in service of the pursuit of truth. Here, above the valley and beneath the shifting mists, the monastery endures. It is a sentinel of memory, a repository of secrets, a guardian of truths that defy time. And for the rare visitor who dares to enter, it offers a glimpse into a world where faith, knowledge, and courage intertwine. A world where every stone, every page, every shadow is imbued with the devotion of those who risked everything to preserve what the rest of humanity feared to know.